We have yet another stunning lineup of excellent candidates that we can choose to be President of the United States. Are you fed up? Are you disillusioned? Are you having a hard time deciding who to vote for? And are you tired of seeing all the posts on Facebook and Twitter and all your social media things that you spend all your time on? Are you getting sick and tired of seeing all the posts about the different candidates and what they've done and who they are and who's leading in what polls? Well, don't you worry. I'm here to share with you what you can do about your disillusionment. Since 2011, 64 foreign governments or foreign state-owned entities have contributed to 28 organizations in the United States that are called think tanks. What do you want to be when you grow up, son?
When I grow up, I want to be in a think tank.
These organizations share a very small amount about their donors. They don't say who they are or tell us all about them, but what we do know from recent disclosures from those organizations and from financial filings for nonprofit tax-exempt status, etc., has let us know that $92 million in the last 4 years has been contributed to 28 American think tanks. Now that's a lot of money. And what does this have to do with the elections? Well, what I'm here to tell you is you can find relief from all of your cares and sorrows related to the elections. Let them fall by the wayside and frolic free without worrying about all this stuff. And why? Because your vote doesn't matter anyway. So no worries. No worries. Just look at the numbers and learn about all the different reasons that your vote makes no difference. And once you know that, you're free, because now you don't have to worry about whether Ted Cruz or Donald Trump is the most popular candidate. What if you're thinking Donald Trump is this terrible, terrible candidate and it's just driving you crazy because these are really the people I have to choose from? Well, you don't have to worry because you're not choosing anyway. Someone else is. Even foreign governments have more say in our elections than you do. So let's talk about one of the most boring topics in politics. One that no one wants to hear about and nobody cares, but it actually makes a huge difference in terms of where the country goes in its foreign policy and its domestic policy. It makes a huge difference in how the government affects your life. So while it may not seem important, I can assure you that if you'll stick with me and listen to me tell you about only three of the thousands, there's about 6,000 think tanks. And this is going to help you to escape these feelings of sorrow for where America has gone and its candidates and its lack of statesmen. Where did all the statesmen go? But you don't have to worry about it because the people that really make the decisions are the people in these think tanks. The first one is the Brookings Institute. According to the University of Pennsylvania's 2014 Global Go-To Think Tanks report, the Brookings Institute was the most influential think tank in the world. What does that mean? Influential how? Well, I'll let you look into that because it's too boring for me to do the research. But I can tell you that the majority, almost all, 90-something% of the people that are in this think tank are liberals and Democrats. And the financial support and revenue for this company was $107,562,000. That's more than that's more than the influence I have financially. I don't have $1 million. I don't have $100 million. That's a lot more than what I contribute to politics or even to my own mortgage. All you really need to know is that this think tank gets a lot of support in grants from the Rockefeller Foundation and from the Ford Foundation. Now let's see if there's any other think tanks that get their funding from those places. The next think tank that I would like to discuss with you is the Council on Foreign Relations. In my opinion, this is a much more influential think tank than the Brookings Institute. The Council on Foreign Relations was founded in 1921. That's 8 years after the founding of the Federal Reserve and 8 years after the implementation of the income tax. Their primary objectives focus on globalization and free trade. Their membership is largely populated by executives at large banks, high-level politicians, high-profile media figures. Basically everybody that has a lot of power is a member of this think tank.
Oh, thank you very much, Richard, and I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, I guess, the mothership in New York City, but it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
You know, if you don't believe that there are people behind the scenes who have power and pull strings, and in other words, influence politicians to do their bidding, you know, all you need to do is watch a couple of videos like this where Hillary Clinton or other high-level politicians are just outright saying that this is what they do. It's not theory, it's fact. It's verifiable. And the Council on Foreign Relations is one of these organizations. The Council on Foreign Relations has a major publication that policymakers and politicians use as a source for information about what the experts feel they should be doing. The Council on Foreign Relations is primarily funded by the Rockefeller Foundation and the Ford Foundation. They do get money from other sources, but did you notice that those are the same places that the Brookings Institute gets its money? Interesting. So the most influential, according to a report, and what I consider the actual most influential think tank, both get their money from the same source. Now, let's see if the third one gets its money from the same place. Maybe it does, I don't remember, maybe it doesn't. But the fact that these top two get their money from those same sources, it begs the question, what is the Rockefeller Foundation and what is the Ford Foundation? Might be worth looking into. And if you think this is just a small group, that's just an offshoot, it's just this one-off, random, small, inconsequential group that may have a couple of people in power, but it doesn't get much, doesn't have much clout. Listen to this. A critical study found that of 502 government officials surveyed between 1945 and 1972, more than half were members of the Council on Foreign Relations. During the Eisenhower administration, 40% of the top foreign policy officials were members of the Council on Foreign Relations, and Eisenhower himself was a member. Under Harry Truman, 42% of the top foreign policy officials were members of the Council on Foreign Relations. Under the Kennedy administration, the number rose to 51%, and then it peaked at 57% under the Johnson administration. One of the most famous and influential and controversial figures that ever came out of the Council on Foreign Relations was Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger served under Richard Nixon and has been in administrations on and off ever since. Henry Kissinger was appointed to head the investigation that the government did after 9/11. He was relieved of that position when there was a lot of resistance from the families of the victims of 9/11. Seeing that there might be a conflict of interest there. All the way back since the 60s, Henry Kissinger has been a major figure in American politics, and I would learn about him if you're not familiar with his work. He's also written a book called New World Order, which is a popular book, and I've read it, and basically it tells a lot of history with accuracy, and then suddenly starts talking about current day foreign policy. And I felt like as I was reading it that I was being manipulated. And you may disagree, but you need to read it for yourself in order to know who this guy is, what his understanding of history and politics is, and what ultimately were his goals during his influential years. Notable members of the Council on Foreign Relations are Ted Cruz's wife. Interesting. And where does she work? Goldman Sachs. What? Ted Cruz, He's a man of the people. He wants constitutional liberty, and he wants small government, and he wants to get the cronies out of Washington, but his wife works for the biggest bank that has the most revolving door, in and out involvement with the government, more than any other bank. And his wife works there. And he took a loan from that bank to fund his campaign. Bet you didn't know that. Maybe you did. Tom Brokaw, special correspondent, NBC News. Now, what role do media people have in setting foreign policy? But it turns out that many of the top reporters for the mainstream news channels are members of the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, I'm not going to go into why that may be, but it's worth looking into, and you need to ask yourself questions of this nature. Why would that happen? Robert E. Rubin, who's that? Well, he was the Secretary of the Treasury a long time ago. He was also one of the top executives at Goldman Sachs during his day. He also served as Bill Clinton's assistant on economic policy. Colin Powell was also in the Council on Foreign Relations. Fareed Zakaria, he works for CNN. He is one of their head reporters. He's in the Council on Foreign Relations. And here's some more. Bill Clinton, Dick Cheney, Hillary Clinton, Chelsea Clinton, Aaron Burnett, Joe Biden, George H.W. Bush, George Clooney. Oh, we have actors too. We have actors strategizing about foreign policy on behalf of the nation? Interesting. Katie Couric, Angelina Jolie. Well, there's another one. John Kerry, George Soros. If you have any feelings about that, well, they all hang out together. And John McCain. All right. So I think we've established that there are a lot of notable members of this organization, and it's in many administrations has been 40 to 50% of the administration came from this council. Now imagine this. You and a bunch of your friends are going to get together and you're going to start a think tank because you know that this think tank gets an incredibly astronomically huge number of its people into office somehow. So you think, well, let's get together and we'll try to get our people into office. How well do you think that's going to go? Even if you got $100 million funded to you, do you think that you could get your people in half of the cabinet positions in each administration? I don't think that I could. I mean, I like to have confidence in myself and feel like, yes, I can do things. I'm capable. But just being realistic, it seems like it's quite a coincidence that the majority of high-level political offices, including CIA, the heads of the CIA and the secretaries of state, all these things are consistently held by members of the Council on Foreign Relations or their spouse. In the case of Ted Cruz, we might see that happen. Or Hillary Clinton, or Bill Clinton. And the last think tank we'll talk about today is the Project for a New American Century. Have you ever heard of this? Well, it doesn't exist. It dissolved in 2006. It was a think tank founded in 1997 that focused mostly on foreign policy, similar to the Council on Foreign Relations, and it was founded by Bill Kristol. Most people don't know who Bill Kristol is. His name sounds a lot like a funny actor from the 80s, but this is a different guy, I assure you. He's not very funny. Occasionally you'll see him appear on mainstream news channels as some kind of expert, but this guy is a major player in globalist neocon efforts in our government. And what you need to know about Bill Kristol is that he was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. So he and some of his buddies got together and they made a new think tank with similar ideals to the Council on Foreign Relations, but with an emphasis on making America a global leader instead of just globalizing. Globalization is, the effort to sort of make all countries homogenous and make it so that trade can happen freely between countries and sort of break down borders a little bit so it's more like we're all one big country. And once that happens, then we'll need a central leadership like the United Nations, for example. And so globalization is one effort, and then making America the leader of that globalization was the effort of the Project for a New American Century. Of the 20 people who signed the initial charter for the Project for a New American Century, 10 of them went on to serve in George W. Bush's administration. So where the Council on Foreign Relations, which started way back in the early 1900s, is able to get a lot of people into office after all that time and after a lot of funding, the Project for a New American Century somehow was able to get 10 of its 21 people into the Bush administration within only a few years of its conception. Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, and Paul Wolfowitz were all members of this group. In 1996, just prior to the formation of this group, Bill Kristol authored an article in Foreign Affairs, which is what we talked about before. It's that publication that the Council on Foreign Relations puts out on a regular basis. In the article, Bill advocated for what he called America's benevolent hegemony, which means that America is basically going to dominate the world, but it's going to be nice while it does it. And so that was sort of his goal. He wanted to create a situation where America could stay this great and powerful country that has a lot of influence in the world, and that we would just be benevolent while we're at it. And so that was sort of the impetus behind the creation of the Project for a New American Century. So whenever you hear words on the news or in discussions like American exceptionalism or making America great again, these things all stem from these same sentiments where we feel that America needs to be this global leader that's this great and powerful thing, and it's because we're so exceptional. It's because we're benevolent and we are the greatest people on earth. So that's sort of this philosophy that this is coming out of. So if you believe that, you're probably a fan of George W. Bush's administration. One of the most interesting things about the Project for a New American Century is the writings. They wrote a lengthy charter that talks all about what their goals are and what their plans are for America and its foreign policy. And I don't think that it was just hubris that they felt that this would make a difference. If I were to write a charter, and no matter how many pages it was, and no matter how big my words were, I wouldn't expect the government to read it and suddenly begin doing the things that I wrote in there. I also wouldn't expect to be the Vice President of the United States or the Secretary of Defense because I wrote it. But here's what happened. So they wrote this big thing, and in it, they were talking about how America needs to be great again. It needs to take back its position as a leader in the globe and stop going adrift in its foreign policy, is some of the words they used. And as one of the ways to make that happen, they were saying that we need to rebuild our military and have it be mighty, and that there wasn't the public will for that to occur. And so they said, basically, we don't see this happening unless there's some kind of new Pearl Harbor which could awaken the country to a sense of urgency about its defense. So, whatever that means, and again, this was in 1997, and this was just a few years before 9/11. Now, that might be a coincidence that those people who wrote that were in office in the administration when 9/11 occurred, and they had advocated just a few years earlier for a new Pearl Harbor. So this might be a coincidence. I'm not saying you can prove a connection, but it seems like a pretty great coincidence that those same people who formed an organization a few years before they became Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney, the Vice President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense, suddenly they're in the administration, and then this new Pearl Harbor occurs. And what happened? It rallied the American people, and it made us feel like we needed to defend ourselves. We gave the government new powers. We gave the government more money for defense. And we even gave up some of our liberties. So all I'm here to do is to help you to feel better about your disillusionment about the voting process. You feel frustrated and angry that these bozos, that these immature slime balls are running for office and that that's who you have to choose from. But I'm here to tell you that your vote doesn't matter anyway. And the think tanks that have hundreds of millions of dollars from domestic organizations and hundreds of millions of dollars from foreign governments who influence them. And these think tanks who get their people into at least half of the high-level government positions that are available. These are the people who are making the policy. These are the people who are choosing who you get to vote for. When you see all these guys on the stage, you find out, do they have connections to Goldman Sachs? Do they have connections to the Rockefeller Foundation? Do they have connections to the Ford Foundation, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Brookings Institute? Where do they get their funds? Where do they get their policies? These people don't know everything. They go into office and they listen to advisors. And who are the advisors? When there's a president elected, he chooses the people in his cabinet. You don't vote for them. And so, if you see someone coming from Goldman Sachs and they get into office and they surround themselves all with Council on Foreign Relations members, you should not be surprised. These are patterns you can look for. And all it means is that you can look elsewhere for your sense of political involvement. You don't have to feel like you're failing when you vote for the lesser of two evils. You don't have to vote at all. All you have to do is make it so that the government that these people represent is totally and absolutely obsolete, because you live ethically and you live with purpose and you make choices deliberately. And so the government doesn't need to give you welfare. The government doesn't need to send you to jail. The government doesn't need to do any of the things that it claims to be for, because the only thing the government is for is to compensate for our vices. And if we can eliminate our vices and live well and live responsibly and take care of ourselves and our neighbors, then there's no reason we even need a government. So that's where I would start. And once you're living in that place, you're not going to be worried about Donald Trump. You're not going to be worried about a socialist in office. You're not going to be worried about Hillary Clinton and all the connections she has to all the stuff I just talked about. Because at the end of the day, the only reason they get the power they have is because we keep giving it to them. And we keep placing our trust in that system. And as long as there's a system that has ultimate power, there will be people ready to go and take advantage of that power. And the people that are in the position to take advantage of that power are not you. So let's take that power back. Let's not give our faith and trust to the system. And let's not reinforce this process that we're so frustrated with by going to the polls and casting our vote for someone that we don't believe in.